Hi everyone, Jonathan here. Hope you guys are doing great. It's been a minute since I made a video like this, but today I thought we could get to look at an interesting open source project, and that is Django-bolt. Django-bolt is a Rust-powered API framework for building APIs with Django. And what it does is to combine tools that are based on the Rust programming language to help you achieve that. And this makes it performant and feature rich. If you are admiring frameworks like FastAPI or Lightstar, then you can still enjoy the benefits of Django while still being in position to build with those features. So without wasting your time, let's build a very simple, very simplistic API with this web framework. Most of the stuff I'm going to be talking about can be found on the documentation, which is found at farhan.li or bolt.farhana.li. I'll leave the link down in the description. So the first thing we need to do is to set up a Django project. To set up a Django project, I'm going to go ahead and open up a new folder. Now let me push this to a window of its own. And I'm on Linux, but on Windows you can still feel free to create your virtual environment. I'll be using UV, and then all I have to do is to first of all create a folder. Let me create a simple bolt service folder, and inside that folder I will initialize a project using UV. And once I've initialized that, now I have a bare UV project. I remove this main.py because I'm not going to need it. And one thing I'm going to do is to then add Django. And then I'll also add Django-bolt. So once I've done that, then we expect Django and Django-bolt to be set up. So Django is going to be the base, and then on Django is where we shall add the Django-bolt to basically create our routes and implement other functionality. So once Django and Django-bolt have been installed, if I go inside my UV run, the commands we currently have are Django admin, which is our Django management command, or the default Django admin command. And then we have the Django-bolt command. We have HTTPX, so this is a dependency of Django-bolt, Python 3, SQL format, and other commands. So let's go ahead and first of all create a project. I'll run UV run Django-admin. We shall create a simple project called core in our folder, and now we have that manage.py and our core. Now, how do we basically go ahead and run our bolt project? To run a bolt project, we have to first of all create an API instance. But now what we can do is to just go ahead and say UV run Django admin, and then start project core. We have done that. So if we have our manage.py, we can now run our server on the port we want. So let me just choose port 5000. And once I've done that, we now see our things are working, our installation is working. Let's run all default migrations. So I can say UV run manage.py migrate, and all the default Django database migrations will be applied. So what's next? I'm going to go ahead and open up VS Code. And it is in VS Code where I'll go ahead and open that project. So I'll open the folder, go to my home, created that inside simple bolt service, and that will be our open project right here. So in here is where we're going to create a new app. So to create that new app, I'll say UV run manage.py start app. Let me call that simple app products. So let's say we are creating a simple inventory management kind of system. We basically have created an app that's going to contain all the logic, all the database models, and everything that there is to products. Now, the first thing, of course, we need to do is to create a database model that we're going to use to manage our products. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and simply create one. Now, let me just create some model right here, or dummy model right here, and then I'll tell AI to do the rest. So I'll say class product. We want to use our ID that's going to be a UUID, and then let me make this a UUID primary key, and then I'll feed these details to AI. And then I'll give this a name that's going to be a string. I'll give this, let's say, an SKU that will also be a string. And then let's say we shall have a description that will be a string. And then we shall, let's say, have what else? Let's just leave it to this. Or let's just have a boolean active, and then bool, which will be equal to false. So what I'm going to do is to make AI generate this database model for us, and then we shall just go ahead and proceed to run everything. So the AI I'm using is OpenCode. I love OpenCode because it comes with quite a lot of free stuff that you can use that is good enough for your normal work. So in my OpenCode right here, the first thing I'll do is to select my model. I will be using now I see Big Pico right here. Let me select DeepSeek version 4, and then I'll also go to plan mode. I'll switch my session, or let me say I switch to my DeepSeek version 4. So what I'm going to do is to prompt the LLM or the agent to create a database model in the product app using the structure that we have created. So I'll paste it in there. I'm in plan mode, so it will go ahead and plan, and then I'll verify and proceed to build out the database models. Okay, so now the first thing we see here is it has given us a plan on how it's going to create our database model, including creating the database model right here. So we have our product model, which is going to be an instance of model.model. If you're familiar with creating Django database models, of course, that's how we create a model. Then we have our ID, which is going to be our primary key. It's going to be a UUID field, a primary key, and we shall always create a new UUID every time we create a new product instance or a new product in our database. And we shall not edit this, so it's okay to leave editable to false. We have our name, which is a char field, an SKU, and then a description active, which is false by default, so everything seems fine. Now, one thing I'm going to tell the LLM is to proceed with no migration upgraded, or I'm going to tell it to proceed without migrating, so that we basically carry that on our own, or we basically do that on our own. So now the LLM is done. Our model has been created. If I go back here, where is our VS Code? Let me place this in number 2, and then we shall have our terminal right here. So our product model is here. We've created our ID, which is a model's UUID field. We have our name, which is a char field, an SKU, description, active. That is okay. So if I go to our settings.py, we have also had our products app registered for us, and that is cool. So now let's go ahead and simply update our database with our products table. So to do that, I'm going to simply come here. I'll create a new tab, and in this tab, I'm simply going to go ahead and run uvrunmoney.py, make migrations, because we've created a new model, but we haven't yet created a revision for it to be applied to our database. Then to finally have those changes in our database, I'll run uvrunmoney.py migrate, and that will update our database with the products table. One other important thing is for us to have our admin with the models registered. So to do that, we can do that on our own. So I'll go to our products app right here, go inside admin.py, and then we shall import our models. So I'll say from dot models shall import our product model. And once that is done, I'll simply go ahead and say admin.site.register, and then I'll provide product. I think I've made a mistake here. So that's basically our database model registered. So let's go ahead and now run our server with UV-bolt or with Django-bolt. For us to do that, we shall go ahead and simply run UV run, and let's actually first try to find out the commands or the options we have with Django-bolt. So if we run UV run Django-bolt, we're going to see the usage. We need to provide options and then run a command. But how many commands do we have here? We only have the command for showing the version. So if we run UV run Django-bolt version, we now see nothing, file not found. So I guess that doesn't work. So let's go ahead and try to run UV run Django-bolt again. Now we see we need --help to show this message and exit, which we have done. So we can also maybe run UV run manage.py because this is an external app. We expect that if we run UV run manage.py, we can see commands that are specific to it. So now these are Django specific commands, and we haven't had any other commands right here. So it seems we need first of all create our app instance. So Django-bolt works in a way like FastAPI or Flask, where you need an application instance for you to be able to have an entry point to your entire API. Let's do this in our core. So I'll create a new module. I'll call this api.py within our core project folder. And this is where I'll create our Django-bolt API instance. So to access this, we shall have to import it from Django-bolt. So I'll say from Django_bolt, we're going to go ahead and import bolt API. Now let's have a close look at what this class is. If you go inside the implementation of the class, we see that it is basically a class, has a danda in it that takes in basically when you're creating a new object, we can specify a prefix, so that will be like the root endpoint or where all the API routes will be found. Then trailing slash strip namespace, we can specify project level middleware, Django middleware. We can enable logging or disable it from here. We can also set up our OpenAPI config. So this is very important for our Swagger documentation. Let us first of all just create this API instance. So I'll say API is going to be equal to bolt API. And once I've done this, then I think that's just what we need for us to have a Django-bolt work. But I think I've forgotten one important detail, and that is to also include Django-bolt within our settings, because it's an external app that we need to have. So before my products, let me just add a comment right here. So this is going to be the third party apps, and then I'll just basically right here add Django_bolt. So that's the name of the package, which is going to be an app that will be added to our Django project. So I think that's what we needed. If I go to my terminal right here and say UV run manage.py, we shall now see another app or a group of commands which will be under Django-bolt. So we have that run bolt command. So let's have a look at it. If I say UV run manage.py run bolt, and I say __help, we shall now see a bunch of options. We can specify the host and the port, the number of processes. So these are going to be like the worker processes. I think you're familiar with that if you've worked with FastAPI, Flask, and other web frameworks. And then you can specify if you do not want your admin dashboard to be shown. You can also set reloading by specifying this dev flag right here. This option will help your server to reload every time you keep changes, and very many other settings. So let's go ahead and try to run our server. So to run our server with Django-bolt, shall say uv run manu.py run bolt, and then I'll say --dev. If I want to go ahead and specify the port or customize the port on which I want this to run, I can say port is equal to 5000. When I press enter, we now see our CLI right here. Django-bolt version is version 0.9, and then we have our URL localhost 5000. How many processes do we have in development? We always have one process, but in production we can specify how many processes we want. 1G. Okay, now with that out of the way, let us go ahead and create our simple API. So I'm going to go ahead and create a simple route handler. How you do that is to use your API instance to create a decorator with whatever HTTP method you want. You can use get, post, patch, delete, head, options, patch, including the query method, the new query method. So that is actually interesting. So let us go ahead and implement a simple get route. Let me make things a little bit bigger. This is going to be our root route, and we can use an async route handler. Of course, these are what it provides by default. So can just call this index, or let's say home, and then this will not return anything but a dictionary or anything that is JSON serializable. So here we shall return a message of okay. So our server will just return okay. We can also specify some other things inside this decorator right here, things like the response model. So that's going to be the message spec struct, because this doesn't use Pydantic, but it uses message spec structs. Message spec is a data validation library that boasts to even be faster than Pydantic. I'll make a video about it. So you can specify things like the status code, the validate, how you validate responses, guards, auth, and very many other things. You can even specify the summary of this endpoint in here. So let me just try to provide a summary. Let's just say this is going to be our home API endpoint. Okay, whatever documentation I've provided here is what we're going to go with. So now that we've created this API endpoint, we now see that our server is reloading because we set this to be in reload mode or in dev mode. So I'll navigate to our docs, which are going to be on localhost, whatever the port we specified, and then /docs, that will be the endpoint. So you can see our Swagger UI is here. It's just so brief. There's not a lot of customizations we have done. I'm going to be showing you how to do that. But all we can do is to maybe try to send our first API request. So now I have a message of okay, everything is working fine. So let us go ahead and customize our Swagger UI, or see how we can add the OpenAPI documentation, or basically specify the metadata for this OpenAPI documentation. How we do that is through the OpenAPI config attribute of this bolt API class. So if you're wondering what that is, it's basically what we have here. And if you're to search, you'll now see if OpenAPI is none. So this is basically where we set that. Django-bolt has a way it can set the default value for that figure, for the project name, if no project name is specified. So the reason as to why we are seeing API here is because it is currently set to API. But in case we need to set it, then we need to make use of a class called the OpenAPI config. So a very good typed code base is very easy to navigate with a modern text editor like VS Code, and that's what I am doing right here. So I can easily know where a certain function or a certain class is by just hovering over it, just like I've done right here, and control and pressing control. So when I press control click, I'll just go to where that class is located, where in the framework or the library I'm trying to use. So that's something very handy. Now, we've known where this OpenAPI class is found, so let's go ahead and import it. So I don't know if this can also be located inside our root project. So let me see from .auth, import all of these things from cookies. I don't think we have the OpenAPI, so we have OpenAPI and we have OpenAPI config. So that's nice. So that means we can access that as well inside our Danda all list. So this makes everything available at the root of the package. So if I come right here, can say from Django-bolt import bolt API, but we also want to access our OpenAPI config. So I can come right here and say OpenAPI config is going to be equal to OpenAPI config. Now this is going to have title, version, contact, simple things we know that exist on your Swagger UI. So the ones that are needed, or the ones that are positional arguments, are going to be the title. So let's say this is going to be a simple product service. And then we can also have another one, which is version. So let's say our API version is going to be version 1.0, and that will be it. So as I've already restart, and if you go back right here, we refresh, we shall now see product service right here. So let's also add a simple description. So if I come right here and say description, I'll say this is a simple, let me make this small, this is a simple API for managing products. And by doing that, we shall have our API documentation updated. So that's basically how you deal with the app instance. With the app instance, you can basically create routes, but you can also set up your Swagger UI or your documentation. Now, the other interesting thing we can do is to create routers. So similar to how you create routers in FastAPI to group related endpoints together, you can also create routers in Django-bolt. How do we do that? If I take you back to our Django-bolt init.py and we go to routes, so we have that router class defined for us. So we can do something like importing the product or importing a router, and then we can put that router in a specific app. So that's what we're going to do. So let me move the router to our product app. I'm going to close some of the files I have here. Let me actually close all of them. Head over to our products app right here inside our views, or let me actually not make use of views, or let me just rename this to routes. So this routes file is what is going to contain those routes. So I'm just going to come and say from Django-bolt import router, and once I've imported the router, then we can simply create an instance. So I can say product router. It's going to be an instance of our router class. Now this works like an API instance. There are very many shared attributes. We can provide the prefix, which is the prefix of all the related endpoints to products. So we can say that all product routes are going to be accessed on the prefix / products. Another interesting thing we can do here is to provide where or which tag is going to be used to group them on our Swagger UI. So that tag is going to be the list of strings. So let's just call this product endpoints. And now we can use that to create our routes. So let me go ahead and use OpenCode to randomly or basically quickly generate those API endpoints for us. Then we shall build this one by one. So to start, I'm going to go to my terminal right here, and inside my open code session, I'm going to tell the AI to implement CRUD routes without the handling logic. It's basically just the methods, the routes, and handlers. If we make CRUD routes without handling logic, just the routes and the handlers in products or in the products app. So let me just say in the products app, and then it will go ahead and create the base on which we shall use to create the logic. So I'll press enter, or I can even give it more details. These are similar to FastAPI routes created from a router object or an API router object. So let's go ahead and see how it's going to plan this out, and then we shall proceed to just review the code and basically do the rest. So according to what we have here, we are saying that the API is going to have our router, and then we shall have our list endpoint. We shall just pass it for now. We are not including the logic. And then we have the partial update route, and then the destroy route. So that's basically what we want. So these are very similar to how you see FastAPI routes, in that you have your decorator with your router. You get access to the HTTP method, and then you specify your path, the summary, and very many other attributes. Then you define a handler that's going to take in the request and basically perform the action just like you want. So what I'm going to do is to tell the AI to proceed, but then I'll be customizing this to match what I want. And then that will be done. So if we go back here, what we have is our new routes, where we basically have our product router created for us. We have actually created this, but we are just having boilerplate for generating the CRUD or creating the CRUD. Now, one thing you can see here is that this is very similar to how you do it in FastAPI. The difference is not actually there. It's all the same. This request object can be in the handler or not, and I'm going to be showing you how that works. These are not Django's default function-based views. These are route handlers that are getting their functionality from all these decorators of the methods we provide. So that's basically how you create our routes. Another thing that I would like to show you is that in our api.py inside our project, we have included the router we have created and then included it onto our API object. So this is very similar to how you see it in FastAPI. So that means that all related endpoints to our product router will be all found on our product endpoint, or the root endpoint for products we specified as our prefix. If I take you to our UI right here, that's if our server is still reloading. If we go back now and refresh, we shall see our product endpoints working now. Now, there's one thing that I wanted to change, that is a preference. Instead of us having pk and having these blank strings, and to keep it to a / to specify that that's the root. And then I also want to go ahead and, instead of pk, use a specific meaningful name, like let's say the product ID. Another thing is I want to leave out the request object because this request object is not needed. Yes, it can be provided within your route handler if you want to access things like the port, the path, and very many other things, because Django-bolt allows you to do that, but it's not a requirement, so it doesn't make sense for us to have it there, just like it is for the normal function-based views in Django. So I'll remove that. Now come back here, fix what went wrong, and that will be our code. Now we currently have these primary keys as strings, but they're also UUIDs. If you look at the parameters are provided in our route handlers, these are not strings. These should be UUIDs according to our database model. So let me go ahead and change this. I'll say product ID, and this is going to be a UUID dot UUID object. So I'll need to import UUID at the top, and it will be imported right here. So that's how our route handlers are going to be. I think I forgot to do it for this one specific API endpoint for updating a product, and that's where we have our route handlers. Okay, so now that we've built our route handlers, the next thing is to now look at how Django-bolt allows us to use our database models. Now Django has a very rich ORM. That ORM can be just enough for you to be able to perform all your CRUD, all your database operations. So in Django-bolt, all we can do is to maybe just use that without having to go ahead and bring in another database ORM library. So what I'm going to do is to try to query for our product. So I can do something like products is going to be equal to product.objects.all. So this is a Django database query to return all products from our database. And then this will basically query for all our products, but then we need to return them in a JSON serializable way. So how are we going to do that? Remember I talked about message spec structs. So the message spec structs are similar to what we see as Django as Pydantic based models, in that they define the fields that we're going to be using to validate and serialize our data. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I go to our products app, I'm going to simply add one file, which is going to be the schemas.py. And in here is where I'm going to go ahead and create those. I'm going to say from message spec, import the struct class. So this is what you have in Pydantic as your base model. And you can create a simple class, like, let's say product. So let me call this product. And then you can call it product serializer or product base serializer, whatever you feel like calling it. I'll just call it a struct. So this is going to be the class by default. Then you define your fields. For example, this can come from our model. If I take you back to models.py, we can have ID name, SKU, description, and is active. So I can come and say ID is going to be a UUID dot UUID, and then our name is going to be a string, just like you define a normal data class with type hints. That's the syntax. So SKU here will be a string, and then we shall have a description, which will also be a string. Now this is a message spec struct. I have to just import a UUID, and that is just enough. But also Django-bolt has a much more powerful way to create these serializers. These serializers can be created from the serializer class. So I can say from Django-bolt import serializer, or this can't be imported from the module or from the module itself. So we have to access another module inside Django-bolt, which is called .serializers. So this serializer class right here is very important because from it you can actually create different views but of the same serializer. I'm going to be showing you how to do that. So we can come and say this is going to be our serializer, which is our base serializer, and then we can create a class here called the config class. So this config class can help us define field sets. Field sets are like views. You can have one base serializer like the one we have here containing all the fields for a product from our model, and then we have all these different things we can carry out on our product. So let's say we wanted to view our products. A field set is going to just be a dictionary, and the key will be the name of the field set. So in this case, let's say we just have a detail. Let's say we want our product detail. So a field set can have all the fields we want to have for the serializer for that specific detail. So for us to do that, we're going to go ahead and have ID name. So that's also going to be part of our serializer for viewing the detail of the product. And then we can have the SKU and the description. So that will be the detail field set. And then you can have other field sets, like let's say the one for creating. So when you're creating, of course, there are some fields we shall leave out, fields like the ID. So that will be our create field set. Now I want to have the base, which is our product serializer, the detail, and the one for creating and updating. So I'll just go ahead and call this the update. So it will have the same fields as our create serializer. To repeat, we've created a base serializer, which is actually a message spec struct. This is what is going to then help us create these other views to have serializers that will be specific to specific things like creating, updating, and maybe viewing the detail of our products. All that is going to come from one serializer. So how do we specify those serializer classes? To do that, we're going to come right here and basically give them names. So I'm going to call this the product update serializer. And how will we get that? We shall say product serializer dot, and now we have all these methods. Now we have a dump from model. This is basically if we want to get the serializer from a database model object. And now what I want is a method called, I'm not remembering it, but the method is field. So what this does is to just get the name of the field set. You specify it from your config, and that will be how you access those fields. So if you want to create the product update serializer, we want the field set. So this field set will be the update field set. So if I provide update here, that means if I use this class for serializing, it's only the fields from the field set that will be in that serializer. Same thing for create. So let me go ahead and just copy paste this to save time. And then I'll copy it 3 times. So let me call one product detail. And then this will be for our detail field set. And then we shall do the same thing for create. So guess what's going to happen? When we do this, we shall just basically have the product update serializer return only fields for updating a product. The detail serializer will only be one with fields for viewing the detail, which are these that we've specified in our field set. So now that we've done this, let's go ahead and also modify our routes to make use of these serializers. So I'm going to go back to my routes. Let me first close what I had there. Go back to our routes of products and then import our serializers. So I'll say from .serializers or schemas, import our different schemas. So I'll import the base product serializer, and then I import the product create serializer and the product update. I think the one for detail is just the same as the one for the product schema, so I'll just use the product schema, the base product schema. So now we've queried our products. How are we going to serialize them to return them to our UI? So to do that, we can just come right here and use our product, or we can actually just return a list. A list is a JSON serializable object, and then we can basically go ahead and use our product serializer, then use that dot from model. This method will serialize an instance of the Django model, just like the product shall be getting right here, and then turn it into a product serializer object. So what happens here is this safely uses type hints in the way that if we specify that this route handler is going to return a list of product serializer objects, then if we serialize, and let's say from each model object P we shall get from our query, we just want to serialize it to get that specific product serializer instance. To repeat myself, what I've done here is to get all products from that database. That is basically a GET request. And when we use that GET request, we now use our serializer to serialize those model objects and create this list comprehension right here. So for each product in the products, we shall just basically serialize or dump from the model object to our serializer and then return this list of product items. So hoping that our server is running, nothing is breaking. I'll go back to our UI right here and refresh. So if we go to listing of all our products, I think we're not having that documented on our UI. I guess I'll have to restart my server. So let me do exactly that. And now I'm seeing an error. So the worker exited. Now the field set update is not found for config.field_sets. I think I made a mistake. This is field_sets, not field sets. So let me go back here and go back to our schemas, change this from field sets to field_sets, which is field sets. So let me stop the server and restart it one more time. So if I refresh, this time we shall see that is showing up here. So our documentation is showing that this will return a list of products. Nice. So let's try this out. If we execute, we now see an error. Let's see what that is. Django.exceptions.synchronous operation. You cannot call this from an async context. So what is the async thing we called? Let's see where that is coming from. So return from model for P in products. I wonder where that is coming from. So if we go to our routes dot all, this should be good to go. Let's see where this is. I think the reason as to why this is happening is because we are executing a for loop and this is not asynchronous. So the framework needs us to run this within an async for loop. So I guess that's something that we have to do. Now let me just turn this into async for product in products, and then we shall just basically append to our list. I'll just create a results list here, and then I will simply append whatever we shall get from serializing. This is going to be results.append, and then we shall basically return our results. So what's happening here is, after creating this list, we shall use our async for to get our products, serialize our products, and then for each of the serialized products, we shall just append it to our results and then return our results. If I come back right here, restart the server, we now see that is returning an empty list. So let me use our Django admin to go ahead and populate some information about products. So if I go down here, I can run uv run money.py, create super user. I'll leave the defaults to the defaults, and then I will go ahead and simply add the password. A super user will be created. So let me rerun our server again. I think I've made a mistake here. I run the server and head over to our admin. This time, if I log in with my username and my password, I can now go to our products and we can add simple products. So let's add a product with the name of, let's say, iPhone 17 Pro 168 GB, and then SKU, let me just create a simple 17 Pro 128, and then I will just copy paste the description, and then I'll say the product is active. So this time, if we go back here, we now see that our API is returning our only product. So that's basically how it works. We use Django's built-in ORM, and then we use message spec structs or serializers to just get those and serialize them to what clients can understand, like the JSON we have returned. Okay, for now we've been able to only perform one action. Let's go to creating a product. So to create a product, you need to, of course, to have a response body. Now, one of the ways you can get that request body is by basically getting it from request, just like you can perform that in Django. But Django-bolt provides us with serializers just like we have created them. Now, the beauty about the serializers are the field sets. We've provided a field set for the create. So that means we can only have fields for creating. And how do we provide that serializer, or how do we specify the data that we want the client to provide to the server? So that is done by providing the parameter of what we want that data to be. So I want this to be the product data, and then I will specify its type to be the product create serializer type. And then with that, I also can specify the return type to be that of our product serializer. So once I've done that, if I go back to my server, so for some reason auto reload is dying every time I'm using routes, so I have to just keep making the server restart. So if I come back here, I go to product, we now see that it expects the following fields, and in its response it has to return this 201 here with this body. Still, we've specified this in our return type. So type hints are very important. Now we can also specify the status code of this endpoint by doing it from our routes decorator right here. So I can say status code is equal to 201, but we actually also have a status module or a status tuple in which we can access all these statuses. So let me go ahead and import that. I'll say from Django-bolt import status. And then instead of hard coding this in here, I can come and say status.http 201 created. So that's basically how we shall create our product. Okay, so let me make a little bit of formatting here with black. And now we have our create product handler right here. So next thing we're going to do, since we have our product data, is to then use that data to create our product. How we're going to do that is to first of all serialize it or dump it in a format that's going to be easily accessible, or we can even just validate that data first. So we can do something like product data is going to be equal to product create serializer dot model validate. I think that's also a method similar to how we have it in Pydantic, where we can get the data as a dictionary and then just simply return that product serializer. Or since the serializer will automatically catch all validation errors, we can just leave it to that and then proceed to create the product. So how we're going to do that is to just maybe try, and then I'll pass this for now, and then I'll accept. So this is where we're going to have our accept block. So we can also raise errors or exceptions in Django-bolt. We have an HTTP exception class similar to that in FastAPI. So we can just say raise HTTP exception. How to get this is still through Django-bolt. I don't know if this is found inside. I don't know if it's found inside the Django-bolt module, or we have to import it. So I guess we have to access the exceptions module from within the library. So if I say Django-bolt dot exceptions, then I can have the HTTP exception class, but then we have other exception classes you can use, and the root is the bolt exception. So we can have the HTTP exception, and this will have the status code, the detail, we can specify the headers, and then other extra data to include in the response. Then we have validation exception, serialization error, unloaded relation, response validation, like all sorts of client exceptions, method exceptions, and so on. Okay, so let's go ahead and raise that exception. So I'll come right here and return an HTTP exception. I'll say we shall have a status code of 500 internal server error. So I'll say status.http 500 internal server error, and then our detail here has to be one to tell the user that they've failed to create the product. So I'll just come right here and say detail is going to be equal to message, or let's just say detail is going to be equal to failed to add product. All right. Now this is going to be just enough for us to catch the errors that may result when you're creating a product. But for us to create a product, we just have to say product is going to be equal to product dot objects dot. Now you would use create, but since we are using an async route handler that is strict about which methods we shall use, then we're going to use Django's async methods on our manager. So the one we need is the async create, which is a create. And then in here, we shall provide all the keyword arguments. So we shall start with the product name. That product name is going to be got from our product data dot name. And then we shall also provide the SKU that's going to be product data dot SKU. And we shall have the description. Description is going to be equal to product data dot description. And yeah, I think those are the only fields we have to provide here. So once that is done, once we've got our product and everything is fine, we shall then use our serializer. So I'll say return product create serializer dot model, or I'll say product serializer from model. So what this does is to just get the instance, which is our product that we shall return right here, which is our product, and then we shall serialize that product or get the fields from it, return it as a product serializer instance. So in this case, we shall provide product, and that is what we shall get right here. So I don't know why this is returning this error. I'm being told argument of, let's actually see what's happening here. So this is an async method because it returns a coroutine type, and I've forgotten to await it here. So that was my bad. So I'm using, I think VS Code uses now Pyrefly to sort of catch those weird type errors, and they're very helpful. All right, so we now have product create serializer dot from model that, so that will basically return our response. Okay, so now that we have a CRUD endpoint for creating a product created, let's also go ahead and do the one for retrieving a product. Now that is also pretty straightforward. We just have to try. This time we shall just try to get the product using get. That will of course returns a not exist error if that doesn't exist. So we shall say product dot objects dot a get async get, because this time we are using an async sort of like route handler. Then we need to provide the item ID. So the item ID in this case is going to be the product ID. So I say ID is equal to product underscore ID. So that's going to be how we get the product. But one thing about the get method that's weird is that if it doesn't work, you're going to get a does not exist error. So how do we catch that? We're going to come right here and accept that specific error. Say accept product dot, I think I made a mistake right here. So I'll say accept product dot does not exist. That's an exception if the object does not exist. Then we shall raise, let's raise a specific exception. Let's try using the not found. I think we have an implementation for this in Django-bolt. So I'll say product not found. Oh yeah, this is basically what I'm going to do right here. Or I can even put this in a separate method where I return the product. How cool is that? So let me try to create a simple function here called get product or exception. This will take in the product ID, because I'm going to be using this when I am updating as well. So it makes sense for me to have that check right here. So this will take in the product ID, which is going to be a UUID. And then it will just simply return the product or return none if the product does not exist, or actually throw an exception. To throw an exception. So this is async def get product or return exception or raise exception, whatever that will be, throw exception. So what do we need here? The try except block is going to be found in here, and then I'll have to import not found. So I think that's something I get from Django-bolt.exceptions. Now if I come down here, product, I get that if a product exists, let's return the product. If it doesn't exist, then let's throw the exception just like we have done here. And I've also said not, which is not, so I'll fix that. And now instead of doing that, we shall just say product is equal to await get product or exception, and then we shall provide the product ID here. So I'll say product ID is equal to product ID, and then we shall return product. How cool is that? So I'm just going to simply use this for getting the product when updating it, and then doing the partial update, and then destroying the product. So that is kind of cool. All right, so now let's go ahead and simply test this out. I'm going to go back. My server is not restarting, so I'll have to stop it manually and restart it. So I'll refresh and then get back here. So let's create a simple product from my UI right here. Let me just leave everything as string and send. So we have a 201 status code returned. And if I go back to our Django admin right here, we have a new product string returned, which is nice. Now let me edit this to make it something good. I'll say Samsung Note 12. This is Samsung. All right, so let me just call this Samsung Note 12, and then I will add this right here, and that is our product. So let me try to see if this is actually existing or has been created. It has been created. We have confirmed that in our UI. Just to list it here. So when we list, we have this order right here. Now I want to customize this to make sure that items are ordered in a descending order, or I don't know. Let's keep it to this because we don't have those timestamps. I don't know if Django keeps those, so we don't have them. So let me just keep them in their order or something like that. Okay, so now we have our two products. So what I want to do is to also try to retrieve one product by its ID. I'll copy this. I'll come here, try to provide this. Now there's this one weird issue I found with the Swagger UI when using Django-bolt. I always have to not use this here because it shows a JSON object is what is needed, and we need to provide the product ID. So this is kind of weird. To do that, most of the times I just use RESTFox. RESTFox is a simple REST client that I use nowadays because it makes things simple. I don't have to save things to the cloud. So this is stuff I was working on. But what I'm going to do is to just create a new workspace so that we start from a new workspace. So I'll say add workspace. I'll say this is our sample workspace. And then I'll create this workspace. Let me just create it inside our documents and save. Let me just say sample, select and create. So let's just use our sample workspace. So what I want to do is to just go ahead and get the product by ID. So in here is where I'm going to type the URL localhost 5000 slash products slash the ID of the product I want to check out. So let me actually put this on number 4 and come back here to get the ID. So if I list all products, I'll get the ID of this specific product right here. Now go back to RESTFox. Let me make things a little bit bigger here. Provide the ID of the product, send. And now I'm seeing an error. So we are being told handler return unsupported type product, and we need to return something serialized. So it has to be JSON, plain text, or of course the type of pedantic struct. So let's fix this. This is as simple as just saying that we are going to return a product serializer object. So let's say we're returning a product serializer object here, and we also say we are returning a product serializer object. So you can say dot from model, and then we shall get our instance. So that's going to be our product model. Now I've also noticed something. I don't know if that works. If I say from that a from model, I think that's like the asynchronous version of from model. So if I say dot f from model, I think that works the same. So if I restart here, I'll try it again in our RESTFox down here, and now we see our product is being returned. I think I needed to do the same thing up here where I was trying to get from the model, so I can save a from model, but then I have to wait. So I think that is actually better. Okay, so that's basically it. Now I also want to do the same thing here. So let me see, or I don't know if this will work. Let me just try to go back here and try it out by listing our products. So if I go to create one request, which is for list products, and then I'll copy what we have here, paste it up here, but remove the ID. So if I send, I'll now see that working. So that works fine. Nice. Okay, so now we have just 3 CRUD operations. Now let's go back here. We are now left with updating and deleting. Let's work on those. I will go to updating a product. Now with updating, of course, we have to have the serializer we created for updating. I have the product ID, and I also need to have the product data for updating, similar to how I did it here. So that has to be a parameter of our route handler for updating. If I come down here, I need to specify product ID as a first parameter because that's what we're going to be using to get the product. And then I'll have to provide our product data. So let me format this a little bit. So that's going to be our product ID and our product data. And then the response, we shall return a product serializer object. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to try to get the product. Lucky for us, we have the function for doing that. So I'll say product is going to be await get product or execute exception. So I'll provide the product ID as our product ID here by saying product ID is equal to product ID. And once that is done, we now can basically validate our product. So I can say product is going to be equal to, or we can actually just get our product, and after getting our product, we can then update it using the data we have got from our product data right here. How are we going to do that? First, we shall need to let me just call a method so I can get product create serializer dot update instance. So that's also something that Django-bolt does. We can update a Django instance directly with values from the serializer. So what serializer do we need? We need our product create serializer. I think this was supposed to be the product update serializer because we also have something like that. So you provide the serializer here, and then we can also use that. So I can say update serializer, update instance. So I can have update instance. This will take in the model instance. So the model instance we need in this case is our product. And what shall this return? So this is going to return a model object. And now that's going to be our updated product. So if we check inside the implementation details of this is going to take in an instance and it's going to update that Django model instance with the values from our serializer. So our serializer in this case is the product update data. Let me actually name this to be clear. So if I come up here, I'm going to call this the product data, but let me actually just name it the update data. So once I've done that and update instance, we shall have the product serializer and then we shall update this. So we need to get update a model instance. It returns, it takes in the instance and then returns the updated model instance if it is not saved. So if we get the user like this, then the updated user will be user update, which is the instance, so update instance user, and then await updated user dot save. So user update is the serializer in this case, I think. So let me just come back down here. Update data dot update instance, and then we shall provide the product, and then we shall await. I wonder if this is a coroutine type. Let's try to go back to what we had initially. There's something that seems confusing. So this method right here allows us to update a Django model instance with values from the serializer. Only updates fields that differ from their default values. Okay, so examples, we get the user model here. We get the user object here, and then user update is the serializer. So that's basically what we get from the route handler here. Nice. And then after getting that, we then return update instance, provide the product we want to update. Okay, and then we save. So updated product is going to be equal to update instance. So that's where we are. Then we need to call await, and then await, that's going to be updated product dot save. I don't know if there's a save that exists as well, so that's what we shall use. And then instead of calling this on the class itself, we shall use the object, which is our update data here, or update data. So what is happening here? We are getting our product model object, and after getting it, we then use information from our serializer to update that object. We finally save our object, and then we have to return our data. So we're going to say return, that's going to be return product serializer dot from model, or dot from dot a from model, and then we shall return our instance, which is going to be our updated product. So let's try this out. If I say await and then update product instance of type model in function of this, let me see what this takes in. This updated product is what we needed to provide here from here. So I think that is what was the problem. Okay, so yeah, we get the product. After getting the product, we then update it using the data from the client, which we've called update data, and then we save. And on returning, we are returning a response with a serialized updated product. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and then I think I'm going to leave out the patch for now, and then I will just delete. So to do delete, I'm just simply going to get the product. So if I say a product is equal to await get product, all that, and then we shall get our product ID being equal to the product ID, and then we shall just come right in here, say product dot delete. I don't know if it's an a delete, so that's also exists. So I'll do a delete, and then so I'm seeing an error here. This is a coroutine type, or it returns a coroutine type, so I have to await. Now, since a delete request does not return anything, we have to basically specify 204. If we do not do that, we will have problems, because our route handler will tell us that this has to return something. So always make sure that you specify your status code to be 204, or else if you do not return anything like how we have done, it will keep failing. So I'll come right in here and say status to http 204 no content, and that will be our delete request. Okay, so if I come up here, it seems like I've implemented 4 CRUD methods, and yeah, let's try to test those out. So I'll try to update, or let me just create a dummy product like string, one that has string for everything. That will be created, and if I list all, that will be are listed. So what I want to update is this right here. So after listing all of those, I can come and update. Let me go ahead and just do this in RESTFox because the EU IDs are not displayed well. If I go up here, add, this is going to be for updating. So we can do this. Just copy the URL, paste it in here. So the method we're going to be using is put, and then the ID I want is the ID I've copied. So let me go back one step, get my products, get the ID of the product I'm interested in, which is this right here. So if I go down here and provide the ID, if I send, of course, return and type. So seems like I have a problem here. Let me try to go back here. We're updating. This returns product serializer. Let me see here. I think I need to change and be specific about what I'm returning for each. So returning products serializer, and then we are returning product serializer. Then we are returning a list of product serializers. So here, handler, unsupported type, none type, return dict list or bolt response. So let me try again. And if I send, I now see missing a JSON body. So I'll provide JSON. I provide nothing. They will ask me for a name. So let me say the name of the product is going to be, what shall we call it? Let's say that our name for this product is going to be Oppo Find X, whatever they call those phones. So I'll just provide the name, the SKU, and the description. So the description is going to just be Oppo Find X. And then the SKU here is going to be Oppo Find X. So if I send, that will be updated. If I try to release products again, Oppo Find X will be updated. So that works successfully. Another thing I want to test out is the delete functionality, because that's also part of the simple CRUD I've implemented here. So I said delete product, and then I will create. So if I go to delete product, I'll actually provide the same URL for the product. So I'll just have to change the method name. So this will be delete. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So delete with the URL we've specified, return a 204 no content response, meaning that item will be deleted. So that's basically how you implement a very simple CRUD service using Django-bolt. There's so much I can say about Django-bolt, but please check it out because it is a very interesting framework that provides a lot while also helping you to work with Django the same way we work with Django REST framework. You can check out the topic guides on how you can implement request handling at an advanced level, handle responses, schemas in detail, authentication, permissions, class-based fields, paginations, and so on and so forth. If you've liked this video, please leave me a like. Do not forget to subscribe, guys. I am trying as hard as I can to get back to the point where I was creating videos. And just like you've seen,